The views and opinions expressed during Eye on the Triangle do not represent WKNC or NC State student media. Your dial is currently tuned to Eye on the Triangle on WKNC 88.1 FM HD1. Thanks for listening. Bienvenidos a Eye on the Triangle. Today, we're having our Latina Heritage Month special with guests from Latinx Ed and nonprofit Perseverancia. Without further ado, let's get into some news. So hello and welcome to WKNC's Eye on the Triangle, your source of local news where we dive deep into the pressing issues affecting our communities. I'm your host, Emilia Rivadeneira, and here with us today is Jack Rothacker, senior at NC State, majoring in Spanish, and founder of nonprofit Perseverancia. Thank you so much for being here today. Jack, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So to begin this program, I wanted to ask you, what is Perseverancia?
Yeah, so Perseverancia is a nonprofit, a registered 501c3. I've had the status since September of 2023. And basically, our mission right now is to fundraise 3 classrooms, a 7th, 8th, and 9th grade classroom for a small school in Soyapango, El Salvador, for a school called the Liceo Juan Calvino School. And so the school is just a small school, and they only have kindergarten through 6th grade. So when the kids get to 6th grade, they have to leave the school because there's just no more grades. And kind of what the stat is in El Salvador is that 5 out of 10 kids don't continue to the 3rd cycle, which is 7th, 8th, and 9th. Yeah. So my nonprofit's mission right now is to fundraise a 7th, 8th, and 9th grade classroom.
Yeah, and what kind of inspired you to start this project? Like, do you have any personal connections to specifically El Salvador, or just, what kind of was the beginning of this journey?
Yeah. So the way I guess met the church in the school, so it's like a church in a school, basically. They're like the same people that kind of run all of it. In the summer of 2023, I went on a mission trip with my grandpa's church in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And so I've been a bilingual speaker since kindergarten now. I went through a K-8 bilingual school in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I just grew up around the language. So this was my first time traveling internationally to a place where I could use Spanish. And so it was a 7-day trip to El Salvador, stayed in this church, and it was just amazing. I was just the hospitality was amazing. We just explored the country. Like, they sat us down and kind of like told us about what's going on in the country. We met other nonprofits, and then we got to meet the school, which is the Juan Calvino School, and we just got to meet the kids. And so they kind of have a high school, but I actually learned after living there over the summer that it's just like another public school that kind of just uses their facility after the K-6 finishes their day. So we were just hearing about like the kids' dreams and what they would like to see be improved with the school and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the way I really got started with it. And then when I returned to the United States after the 7-day trip, the mission trip in 2023, I just felt a call to action. I was in I had a good opportunity with my fraternity at the time to start the nonprofit because we needed a fundraiser. There's a philanthropy aspect of it. And I felt like we could all rally around this and be like, let's build a classroom. Because it initially just started as one classroom with the 7th grade classroom. Wow. And recently over the summer, we got like denied for the permit to build just one, and they wanted us to do 3. So that's why over the summer, after 1 year of fundraising, it got switched to 1 to 3 classrooms. But yeah, so that's kind of my uprising with it all and what helped me start the nonprofit and how I met them.
Wow, that's really inspiring. And yeah, I was actually going to ask you about it because I know that it started kind of like with just one classroom, and like I was also going to mention recently the project marked its 1 year anniversary. Am I right?
Yeah.
So how do you feel about like its impact and progress? It just started with one classroom, but now it has grown to a 3 classroom project. So how do you feel about this?
I love it, honestly. The progress has been amazing. So with the one classroom, it was a $21,000 project. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna start a GoFundMe. let's get it going. And one of the reasons I had to start the nonprofit is because GoFundMe doesn't work with Central or South American banks. So initially, I was just going to
Oh.
use their bank account, put it in there, fundraise, not even start my own organization. Only reason I like really started this is like, yes, I used to be a business major, love entrepreneurship. I wanted to
Mhm.
do some type of thing with my own, but there was just no other options. Like there was no other options
Mhm.
to safely fundraise. So that's why the nonprofit just had to be made so I could have that safe 501c3 bank account. And it's kind of just turned into so much more. So with that one classroom being denied, it only creates a bigger impact, but it also makes me work harder. Um, so I mean, going from 21,000 to a now $70,000 budget of 3 classrooms, a second floor, it's honestly been super exciting. It definitely gets a little overwhelming, and then there's also this deadline of the way their school year works is
Mm.
it's from January to November,
Right.
so we can only
Mhm.
build at some point because it's kind of a small area to where like if you were building, you don't want to like be building during the school
Right.
day,
This. Yeah.
it would be dangerous. So we really just have this November, December, January, and for the project so far, I've raised $15,000. The church I went on the mission trip with has donated 5,000 to the project, so we're at 20, right? So we have one classroom that's going to be built in November. It's like predicted to be around November 15th.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But now it's just like, okay, we have this 3 month deadline. And then I'm
Yeah.
also a senior who's, trying to figure all my stuff out. So
Right.
I'm like, let's go hard now. And just trying to figure out more ways to fundraise and just network and just, build a brand at the same time so that people can respect and, know that their money's going to something good. Um, so yeah, it's been a mixture of all, but the 1 to 3 classrooms has honestly been somewhat of a blessing to honestly just help me just see more beyond just one thing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. And again, it's just like so inspiring to like listen to this journey that you had with just like building Perseverancia and all. Um and I wanted to ask you, like, in your opinion, um how do you think having access to this classroom, well, now 3 classroom, can significantly change a student's life in that community in El Salvador?
yeah. Um, it's really amazing. Like, so I lived there this summer. I lived there for 2 months. I kind of had like an internship with Habitat for Humanity. I lived out of the church every day. So I did Monday, Wednesday Habitat, and then Thursday, Friday, or Thursday the rest of the week with the church and the school. So I really just on those Thursdays, Sundays, I really got super tight because I was only there for a 7 day mission trip.
Right.
I visited the school 2 times. I was there for probably a total of 6 hours. Like I was there for 2 months this summer. Like really built connections. So it really does mean so much. Um, the kids there are just awesome. I mean, they're just they're normal kids. It's like me going to my K through 8. Like if I were to just be have to figure out what's next in education after that, it'd be very difficult. So I think the director has really just inspired me to continue by kind of expressing how much this project will mean for the community because it is a community that was in somewhat of an area of violence. And that just having these classrooms, something tangible, is going to create a long lasting, almost generational impact. It's like these current sixth graders, there is somewhat of a rush. It's like, okay, I don't want to do this today. Well, all right, if I don't do this today, then we might not raise $1,000. And then,
Yeah.
these sixth graders aren't going to have the opportunity to continue seventh grade. So the impact is really awesome. And I think that's what's the best part about this project and what makes it the most, I guess, like marketable, other than just like my passion and like love for the actual kids and knowing their names and being able to meet them, even meet their families. I mean, I got to meet the teachers over the summer. I already kind of knew them, but I mean, I sat in their classrooms, I observed. They included me in the lessons. Like I got to play games, play soccer with them. So I think the best part about this project is just the long tangible impact that we really are. It's really helping.
Yeah, for sure. And well, you have mentioned a couple of times that you spend the summer there. And so what was kind of like the most shocking thing that you learned in that trip, just in general, or about education in El Salvador?
Yeah. Um yeah, so living there was really cool. I mean, one, so like I said, I've spoke Spanish for a while, but this was my first time where it's like, okay, it's 24/7 Spanish.
Yeah.
So that was just like a transition. It was definitely exhausting, like long days. And that's why I switched my major actually, just because I'm like I want to express myself more. I need to. I just want to be better. Um, but I think the number one thing about El Salvador that I really just I really just love is really just the people. I actually have just a lot of friends there. I mean, through the church and then working with Habitat for Humanity, they just always take care of you. And I think the main thing that like is such a testament to that is the difference in lives, or I guess like lifestyle. Um, just because like living in the church, like, and I really don't care, but there's no AC and it's just different to cook, and the way the products that you're buying at the grocery store are just they're more expensive because they're imported and stuff like that. So I think the kind of the narrative of who a Salvadorian is that they're resilient. And so I think just seeing how they carry themselves and how they continue to push through many hardships in their life, that communities have faced, that natural disasters have brought, it really is just powerful. Honestly, one of the I guess a specific example. One day I visited this community in La Paz. It's a department there, um, and when I went there, it was winter for them, and so it was just raining the whole time. And so I visited this community, and like whenever we like visit communities, we kind of just like get in a circle, and it's like just a group conversation, and they kind of just like tell me about their lives and stuff like that. So they were telling me like a week ago they live near the rivers, and one of the rivers like flooded bad, and like my first 2 weeks there were a bunch of floods really bad. But the community, we kind of met with like the community leader, I guess, and she showed me this video of like, I mean, Hurricane Helene type of flood, where like rapids,
Yeah.
and they have like a rope and they're helping like people get out of their houses, and it's not even like their community technically. It's like 15 minutes away. And then when we left that day, it started raining again, and we saw the rivers as we were driving back to San Salvador, and it was just very intense. And then we got a call, and they're like, "Yeah, they went back out to go start helping people."
Oh my god.
And that's just like after like a long day of just providing for their family and gathering the community together and being leaders. Like they're always, it really just taught me it's like whenever you think you're tired, you're not tired, you know. So yeah, the the resilience, that was the number one cool thing to see.
Yeah. Um, and talking more about your project, you spend the summer there talking with the kids, talking with teachers, and like just being an observer in general. What do they think about this project that you're starting?
Yeah. Um, so that was always something that I tried to really make sure, like when I went to the director saying like, hey, I want to try to like create a fundraiser or something like that. I was like, what do you guys need? And she was like, well, a classroom would be awesome. So initially we were just gonna do like 15, and she's like, oh, like, we should do 21 so we can fill it with materials too. It's like, all right, 21. But with the actual project and how long we've been working on it now, no one really kind of knew about it other than the inside people. So like the school, the teachers, they knew about it, and the staff, like at the church and the school, they knew about it, but not really. I mean, the kids are very young, so they may not like understand to an extent.
Yeah.
Um, but the best part that has come out of people knowing now was I have a team in El Salvador right now
Mm-hmm.
that I'm working with. So I have um, a couple people from this small community called Rosario de Mora, and one guy is designing my whole website right now. I have another guy who's been filming videos at Juan Gardino, interviewing students, interviewing past students. We have one guy like translating to make captions named Joseph. So it's really been powerful, honestly. Like we have Zooms all the time of just kind of like it's basically just like kids from the church around our age. I mean, it's the whole church. I mean, there's a 40-year-old guy with like three kids in our on our team right now. So it really is like the community. That my last day at the church service, they like gave me the mic, and I mean it's a small church. So there's like 20, 30 people, and we just like talked about the project. We showed designs of the classroom. They're like, this is why Jack was here, kind of this summer. And I mean, the whole summer, like I was working with the pastor's son named Oscar, and he's been my guy. I mean, we had a phone call yesterday. He's been helping a ton. So I think that's been the best part is that people have got behind the mission of education is a way to change the future. It is with this small school is a way that we start this movement of motion of what we are trying to do. So to have like an actual team and El Salvador right now that I'm consistently working with, has almost reaffirmed me of the mission that we've chosen, and again, to just continue to work hard.
Yeah, and you mentioned something really inspiring, which is, education can just like change, like, and it's like a movement. What did you say? Movement of,
Movement of motion. Yeah.
yeah. And so, how does that resonate that with you, like on a personal level, like that, movement of motion and like creating that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think education is truthfully, it is. So the United Nations, they have 16 sustainable development goals. I think 16, maybe 17. That's bad. Let's say 17. 17 sustainable development goals, and education is one of them. And the thing with education is, as someone who has had education my whole life, I'm one of those people who sometimes I'm like, I hate school, I hate this. But then you realize how smart we actually are and how much information we're just taking in. Like, even if we're daydreaming in class, we're learning about something important during it. We're learning about something that's going to make our brain smarter. And I think the thing with education is, it is such a privilege, and it's also such a tool, and it's a safe place, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
in these countries where life can be more difficult sometimes and the circumstances are tougher, to have education or even just keep kids in school, it really is such a way to just, it just betters everyone. I mean, one, people are smarter. I mean, El Salvador, they had a lot of people migrate over the last couple of years. Um, so it honestly does, like the directors told me, like it helps reduce the immigration rate, because if people are staying in school, then they're getting good jobs in El Salvador,
Yeah.
and it's improving the economy
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. So there's a lot of other impacts. It's reducing poverty. I mean, El Salvador is 25% poverty in the whole country. So there's just a lot of stuff that educate. I mean, if you are in school and you're studying and you're learning good stuff, and I mean, so college is kind of difficult there. There's like one public school, and then there's multiple private, and Juan Calvino is a private school, so they have to, like, it's only scholarships basically, or you have to pay, and it's like
Oh,
200 a month. So
right.
like that's why like these churches in the United States can like almost fund a full school
Right.
like every single year, and that's like their project. That's like the church I went on. They like fund like 40 kids or something like that. And so, um, yeah, so high school it's just like a trade school essentially. So you go for like 3 years, and then you choose like accounting, or let's say language, or something else, and that's the degree you get, and that's usually the farthest that people go. But it's just, I mean, we went through a K through 8 to high school to a 4 year college to maybe a grad or master's school. Like, it's just so much information that we're taking in. So with education, I think it's just understanding like where I've come from and how much it has done for me, even though I do sometimes not realize that. So to try to just give that back in a way that I think can benefit them. I mean, even like with, if they had sports teams, if they had extracurriculars, it's keeping them in a safe space where they're
Yeah.
learning and doing positive stuff.
Yeah. That's super cool. And what is your long-term vision for personality? I know that, well, now you're in the process of like building this classroom, but just long-term after that, what is the vision?
Yeah. I think about it every single second of every day. That's of how to sustain, right?
Yep.
So right now I'm in this current of, all right, 70,003 classrooms. I mean, I'm running around right now. I'm doing a soccer tournament for November 16th, which I'm trying to raise 20,000 at, is my goal. Um, so I've really just been super consumed with that, and it's made it really difficult to build this brand, right? So with nonprofits, you do have to think of it as a business. My model has been 100% donations. Like, I've never taken anything for overhead. I'm taking everything out of my personal account. I've had people, I don't know, worked with clubs or stuff like that. But I guess I say that because I am really trying to figure out what is the best way that we can. I want to create a model, right? Like, think of the Habitat for Humanities.
Yeah.
They're in like 70 plus countries. They're all over the United States.
Right.
Working for them, seeing how complex their business model is, but how beautiful it is, and how they're just, I mean, they're making 20 million a year, for example, to build houses for
Mm-hmm.
people. So honestly, this classroom is my like MVP. It's like, okay, we are doing something. We
Yeah.
are creating real world impact. Um, my most recent idea, I guess, other than continuing to build classrooms, I hope to start providing scholarships for the students soon and set up like a scholarship program. Um, so those would be my main two, and then I want to kind of just work across El Salvador. Continue to work with the Juan Calvino School. The next project will be a high school for them, so it'll be a trade school. So we're really just trying to just build that up as much as I can. I mean, they're my day ones. They're the people who have let me fundraise for them.
Yeah.
Like truthfully, they've given me so much. Um, so yeah, that's like my current. But again, when I say I want to create a business model, so this spring I had the opportunity, or last spring I had the opportunity to study abroad in Barcelona, and I stayed in a lot of hostels. And hostels are basically, I'm sure you know, but yeah, hostels are
Yeah.
just like a cheap way to travel, you
Yeah.
know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have this idea of trying to create a discipline at NC State of like mission work. Because really, when I say movement of motion, the way I look at my life now is I just want to do good in my life. Like it doesn't matter what I do. I love Latin America, and it probably is because of the language and I love the people and my
Yeah.
experience. But I want to give back every single day. I want to use my entrepreneurial mind to create good social impact. So back to it. I want to create a discipline about like mission work, right? And it would be like a 12-week course, and like the first month is at NC State, let's say, and they like just it's a mission, and it's like this is what we're gonna do, this is how we're gonna do it, and then we actually go to the country, and there's like three teams, and let's say one's with water, one's with healthcare, one's with education, and we make documentaries across the country, and it's like a 10-week program, and they do that, but then over time, I want to start to purchase hostels, and with the hostels, I want to do it in areas that would make sense to where we're not messing up their, I guess, culture in a way.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, like Hawaii, you can buy a lot of things and mess it up because with
Mm-hmm.
tourism. But buy hostels for one, the discipline, like the people who are studying and in the mission to stay, but then also create it to improve the local economy, create jobs. And it almost, and again, this is very just like my idea, but like 50% like people are staying, so then passive income is coming in, and that
Right.
money is fully going into the nonprofit, and that would be a separate type of investor almost. Like I wouldn't even call it overhead. It would be like the 100% like perseverancia donation model, and then it would be the people who are investing in the hostels and then making, who knows, the money, we'll figure it out. But yeah, so and then we would just start buying hostels all over Latin America, and just promoting travel, and it would be the hostels would almost be like an extracurricular space for students, to where they're building it up. There would be gyms. So again, I just have a lot of ideas. They're still kind of forming, um, but I'm 100% not going to stop. I mean, my vision is to make this one of the biggest nonprofits like in the world, honestly. And it's also an experience thing for me because I kind of just picked up all of this, with just randomly starting a 501c3 in a way, like learning how that works every single day. I mean, working with Habitat was my first time ever working with a nonprofit. So I am like trying to take it somewhat slow, but in 5 years, I do say that I want to have raised $1 million. So that's like my goal.
That's the goal. Yeah. Um. And if you could share one message with the Latinx community about the importance of this project and the role in education, what would it be?
I think the importance of this project is we all have the chance to come together as one, to have a community moment and do something fun in the meantime. Like fundraising really is fun. You can be so creative with it. You can do so much. Um, I met with this band the other day called Stan and Denhi, super awesome Venezuelan band. Yeah, so they're gonna be performing at my soccer tournament in November 16th. They're awesome, and we were talking about it, and I kind of mentioned like, I mean, one, I guess we're doing this for a Salvadorian classroom in San Salvador for this school, but you know, these events are also to bring the Hispanic community together, the Latinx community together.
Yeah.
I mean, last year it was awesome. We had Subaritmo out there. We had Spanish music playing the whole time. We sold pupusas. So really, I mean, I want this to be an opportunity for other people to just have fun. Like genuinely, like I love the music. I love the food. I love it so much. So this is just it's a community moment. It's a moment to just have fun and do something good for the Latinx community in a way. Um, so yeah, that'd be my mission, my message.
Yeah. And just as, one of our final questions, what can you say to our listeners if they want to play like a supporting this initiative? Like, what would you say to them they can do? Or
Yeah. So it's kind of it. So I guess right now I would say recently my website, my domain expired. I had some issues. I didn't even buy it. Some random guy kind of had it. So my website is like honestly being renovated right now, but I'm rebranding the whole nonprofit. Like the logo changed, everything changed. However, I would say that just because I would direct you to my website. Um, Honestly, reach out to me. I've had an issue with letting go in a way of having people help me, but I do need help. I mean, the whole point of this is to do it together. Like, we have to do this together. If it would be so accomplishing. Last year, I went to Greek Life and I pitched. I was like, let's build a $21,000 classroom. Let's all do it together. We can literally all do this. Like, 21,000 is really not that much. Like, I really don't think it is. 70,000 kind of scares me a little bit. It's really only 50,000 now. And we can do big things. Like, imagine working hard. The tournament is going to be in 38 days, right? So that's my next fundraiser. That's my next opportunity
yeah.
to raise money. Tournament's in 38 days. I'm counting down. Every single day is, I mean, what do I need to do now? Well, logistics sort of thing. I mean, if we all come together, all these amazing clubs, I mean, Mi Familia, the nonprofit El Pueblo, I mean, we all put our resources together and we fundraise this thing. I mean, that's something that you walk away as a senior, as an undergrad, as anything, as, whoa, we just did a big project. And then one day you can travel to El Salvador and you can go visit the school and be like, I helped build that. So I think that's like my number one thing is like reach out to me, reach out to your clubs, reach out to your friends. I mean, you can play in the soccer tournament, but there's also so much more that you can do. I mean, I'm trying to build a brand, so at the same time, it's a lot. But I guess the number one thing I'd want people to take away is let's just do this thing. You know, if you bring out a friend, if you sign up for the soccer tournament, if there's anything that you see, I'm always open to new things and I'm looking for the next big thing. So looking for the next person to help. So yeah, just anyone who's interested, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jack, this has been a very insightful interview. Thank you so much for coming to Eye on the Triangle. We love having you here today with us. So, yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much. It's been awesome.
I'm your host, Emilia Rivadeneira, and here with me today is Elaine Townsend Uten, co founder and executive director of Latinx Ed, and Chiara Aranda, director of programs of Latinx Ed. How are you guys today doing? Thank you for being here.
Oh, we're having a good time. Thank you, Amelia. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so I'm really interested about just knowing what is Latinx Ed, first of all.
Yeah. So Latinx Ed is a statewide education nonprofit organization based here in North Carolina, advancing Latina leadership and participation in higher education. And so our work calls upon us to really reimagine what culturally inclusive, culturally sustaining education systems look like that really meet the diverse needs of Latina immigrant families here in North Carolina. This work is very, very personal for us because it connects to our own journeys in education as Latinas, Latinos here in North Carolina. And so a lot of this work is about writing a love letter to our younger selves, which is in many ways the folks who are coming after us, to make sure that they are able to have options, choices when it comes to pursuing education after high school, but also have an opportunity to lead and to really think about who they are in that leadership and learn how to lead from a place that really values our culture and really is able to operate from a place of healing and wellness and learning how to take care of ourselves, because leadership and learning is not easy and it is really hard and challenging. And so we're building our own frameworks for how to do that as a community and helping folks navigate that with community.
I mean, that is a really good just initiative in general. And Um, I wanted to ask you guys like what personally kind of like inspire you to, well, in your case, Elaine, to like kind of start Latinx Ed, but as well just like join this initiative too. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's fun that I have my colleague and hermana and friend Kiara Randa here with me today because our stories are very much intertwined. So we might tell you a little snippet about our journeys and how it kind of leads into Latinx Ed.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I'm like, Kiara, you want to go first? No, I'm just kidding. I'm happy to start us off, and then I'll text it over to Kiara because she has such a powerful story. But for me, I'm originally from Peru. So I was born there, but raised in the US for the most part, the South, and came over when I was really young. So was raised in very rural parts of the South, and North Carolina has been home for the longest. So I was raised in Union County, so right near Charlotte, Amelia, where you're coming from.
Yeah.
704. And that part and that journey, being the oldest of six kids, being the first of my family to pursue college in North Carolina, like there was so many layers to that, trying to figure out how to take care of my family, how to take care of each other, and feeling this big pressure around trying to figure it out with very little information. And so I decided I was going to pursue college in 11th grade. And because I was seeing my peers doing things like the studying for the SATs and doing all this stuff that I was like, what is that? Tell me more. Because I just hadn't grown up in very college going environments. So a lot of this was new to me and my family, especially my mom. But my mom ended up being a huge advocate for me, even though she didn't have that experience herself. But she was working at a community college as an ESL program coordinator. And she was just rating all the resources. She would find scholarships and she'd bring them home and say, you have to apply to this. And at the same time as I knew I needed to go on this big journey and pursue college and whatever that meant, I needed to do it for my family's sake. But it also was a time of a lot of anxiety and a lot of doubt, a lot of not, not feeling like it was meant for me. And at the same time, if you were to look at me on paper, I was a student that was, excelling in school. And you would think naturally this person would just go on to the next stage. But because of not having space to really understand education as a system, but also as an opportunity, and then just how I could factor into that. And, it just became a harder than not process. And it ended up being a very lonely journey at times, trying to figure out what at that age feels like you're like the most life defining decision in some ways of like where you're going and who you're going to be. So with the college application process, asking just questions like, who are you? Very deep. It's such a hard process, especially for young people. And it was, the same way for me, where they're asking like, what's your greatest sacrifice? Like such personal questions that I had not really had a chance to think about, nor had I been asked in school. So it became a time of deep self-reflection, but in a way that it's also there's a risk to if you or consequence if you don't get it right. And I think that journey, just when I made it to and through it, when I say by the grace of God and my mama, you made it through, and Google, but making it through, it became this like passion of mine very quickly. I think it's probably because I'm the oldest daughter and the oldest child in my family, but to just make the path easier for the people coming after me, because I just felt like if I could impact at least one person's experience in education, it would be worthwhile to me. So that kind of starts the heart of wanting to be able to support other people who had similar challenges to me, kind of navigating, especially education, but also that college application process. So it starts there with that passion around advancing our community into higher education. But I'll turn over to Kiara, who will share a little bit about her story. And we might tie it into why leadership becomes a big theme of our journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Elaine, a lot of what I'm always reminded of just how much our stories overlap and intersect and I think speak to the experience of many Latina youth growing up in North Carolina. So share a lot of similar experiences, like Elaine has named. I am the oldest daughter of Mexican immigrants. My parents came to North Carolina in the late 90s to a very small rural town, Rockingham, North Carolina. If anyone ever hears about it, I get very excited. That's how small it feels sometimes. But I share that because there wasn't necessarily like an ESL program. There weren't necessarily any support set up when we first moved to North Carolina. So a lot of my journey to and through education was figuring it out on my own, or feeling like I had to figure it out on my own. A lot of that pressure of whether it was like serving as the main interpreter for my family when they had to show up to school events, or having to figure out this whole college application process. I always tell folks that Google was my college advisor, because that's how I figured out everything that I need to do, and the entire steps of the process. But it was a very lonely journey, and I think there was always this feeling as I was going through that in middle school and high school, that it shouldn't be this way. It didn't feel like other people were navigating the same experiences that I was navigating. And it wasn't until college that I really had that realization, right, that folks do have different experiences within the education system, and that a lot of times it's shaped by the counties that they come from. Sometimes it's shaped by the communities that surround them, or the services that are available in their communities. And so, very similarly to what Elaine has named, right, I felt this calling to change the system and the way that it was creating barriers for Latina students, to ultimately be able to make it more accessible for folks who would be coming after me. I remember trying to find opportunities on my college campus for, you know, community and involvement, and I came across the Scholars Latino Initiative, which is at the origin story too of Latinx Ed, or at the origin of Latinx Ed. But this was also the place where I started to not just build community, but I started to experience what education was like for students outside of just my own experience. It was the first time that I was really exposed to what it could look like to be impacted by documentation challenges in your college going journey, which is a whole other experience that was new to me at the time. And that really continued to drive my interest for dismantling the systemic barriers that exist as students are pursuing post-secondary education. And that has really continued to drive my work, and is ultimately what brought me back to Latinx Ed.
Just hearing what you guys like started and when you guys are doing at Latinx Ed, it's just very inspiring. Um, and I wanted to kind of like go back to like the history of Latinx Ed, and like when was it established, like how it's like all of that process when it was like just starting and right now, and like also looking back at that and like how it is now, like in your guys' opinion, like how has Latinx Ed progress, like like through all of these years that it has been like an established organization. So if you guys can share some of that too.
I'm like, buckle up, Amelia. We're about to tell you all the insides out. I love it. And I will name that it's a special history for us for many reasons. But you kind of heard Kiara's introduction into college, and just even learning about other students' experiences is actually where we met. We met at UNC Chapel Hill. Go Tar Heels, me saying this on NC State's radio, but we got a lot of love in our hearts for NC State. But UNC became this like portal into a whole new world, a whole new community. I remember being a first generation college student on campus, like not knowing what I was doing, making all the wrong mistakes when it came to like what courses to take, or, just trying to be a learner. And at the same time was also a worker. I was a student employee. So I was juggling so much, family back at home. And so I quickly found that I needed community very desperately to just ground me through that journey. And so Kiara and I ended up being in a lot of the same circles, which was such a blessing because we got to connect on our own just personal journey as Latinas at UNC. But then also we're just so connected by this commitment to serving our community and to advocating for the needs of others. And so it really sparked a movement in our area, I will say, but also beyond, because it really showed us what we could do together. We were doing things as undergrads that I think if I take a step back, I was like, we did that, we would host events as students where 200 families, students would come out to receive college access resources. Like we got a lot of opportunities just through different mentorship programs and even the sorority that we're part of to just be able to lead. And while we may not have had like a formal training on leadership, we learned by doing, and that's kind of, I think, the narrative of our life, being the oldest daughters and having to do things for the first time. But I think that seed of like, wow, what could we do together? So having done work in college access realms as undergrads would then translate into our professional careers once we graduated. And so being part of the mentoring program that Kiara mentioned, NC SLY, it was really a chance for us to be able to just learn how to do this work, how to serve students, especially undocumented students, and how we could dismantle barriers or at least help them navigate the education system. So came back and I was working with SLY at the time after going through grad school. Even I actually, just a few fun facts about me. I went and worked in South Korea for a little bit through the Fulbright, and then headed to grad school at Harvard to study technology innovation education. And so coming back though was the big thing. I thought, being someone raised in North Carolina, I was like, I'm excited to get out. I'm excited to see the world. And I definitely enjoyed that experience, but everything was about coming back. Even when I was at grad school, all the projects that I did were about North Carolina, was about the Latina community. So when there was a chance to come and serve, it was like, this is what I would Google, this is what I would be looking for. And so we were able to continue that work through mentorship, through that college access support. At the same time, they're up against systemic barriers that our students face. And it's so critical to have the navigational supports. And then also the challenge is, how can we change that? How can we change the ways that systems are designed? How can we change who's at the table? And that became a really growing need as the demand for better opportunities, more college access just continues to grow across the state. That became a big question mark of like, okay, so how are we going to address this? How are we going to shift the needle so that we can see these things start to change versus continuing to just have to help students navigate the same problems over and over again? And so Latinx Ed really comes from that leap of faith because we hadn't really seen an example of what that could look like. And so in 2018, Latinx Ed officially comes into being as official 501c3. And so it's special. We have our roots start in the Triangle, but the vision from the beginning has always been the state. How do we connect the dots across North Carolina? And so that becomes this like movement, which we'll talk more about the history. I'll let Kiara jump in here to share her perspective because she had a different route into this. But it becomes we start to hold the mandate of how do we cultivate leadership in North Carolina to be able to be equipped to serve, to sit at those decision-making tables and start to influence everything from policy to funding to the decisions that are made. And a spoiler alert, because you're like, where does this go next? But we actually start with middle school students, which is such a different route that you might think of where we would start. But it being, having such a strong college access background and expertise, a lot of this became about how do we cultivate future generations of leaders. And as a middle school teacher, that was what my background is middle grades education from UNC School of Education. It made a lot of sense to start with our youth, to think about how are we cultivating their voice, their leadership, creating spaces where we get to go deeper into racial ethnic identity. What does that mean to be Latino, Latina, Latine, and get at the root of some of the strong challenges, big challenges that we faced ourselves in our youth, like not understanding who we are, feeling that ni de aquí, ni de allá, not from here, not from there, and sometimes really struggling to find our place and our role, our fit, whether it was in school or even in leadership. So that becomes a little bit of an origin story, but I'm like, I've said too much already. I have to pass it to Miss Kiara to share a little bit about her journey, and then we'll keep telling you about the progress of Latinx.
Yeah, I'm thinking back about those slide days, Elaine, and yeah, just how much learning came from being in that shared space. But yeah, so after graduating from UNC, my journey took me a little bit of a different route, still connected to college access. I served as a college advisor actually in Charlotte, North Carolina. So was able to be there for 2 years, and that opportunity and that experience really exposed me again to like these same themes that we keep referring back to about the systems and how they're really designed to not make it easy for Latina students, communities of color in general, right, to pursue higher education. And it came to a point, having been doing for me that direct access work, where I was like, okay, I'm helping out all of these individual students, right? But like the system and the challenges are still here. I'm sending them to these systems that are not designed to really support them or to create systems of support for them once they get into these institutions. So how can I really get to the root of the problem, which in the way that I see it is really, how do we improve the system so that they are ready to support our Latina students once they get into these spaces. And that brought me back to Latinx Ed in some ways. At the time that I was going into, this was actually during the pandemic, and Latinx Ed was starting a virtual college advising service. And I love me some college advising, okay? And I said, to be able to do it for Latina students across the state of North Carolina, like it brought me deep joy to think of the possibility of that happening. I thought about all the conversations that I had with students, right, once they got into college, where they didn't have the supports and would have loved to have some assistance. And so to be able to do it with students who looked like me, who had experiences like me, felt like a really powerful opportunity. And so that's how I got reconnected. It was a part-time role. We were able to really get into the mapping and the building out of this college access program that was specifically created with Latina students in mind. And I think what was really special that ultimately connects to this larger story of Latinx Ed is that connection to our personal identity. I think I've been in spaces where I've done a lot of college access work, and it's one thing to talk about the journey to and through college. It's another thing to explore that journey while staying grounded in who you are at your core, the strength that can come from your identity, the strength that can come from your culture. So to be able to connect that to like my Latinidad, to my experience as a learner, has been so incredibly powerful. And I think that's what we started to really get into and explore with College Consejos, just like what does it look like to not just explore these topics of college access, but to also make connections to like, this is a moment for you to practice your leadership, right? This is a moment for you to think about your Latinidad and how it shows up in your learning environments. So that has been, I think, really the most special piece for me of just making that connection for the professionals that we work with, the youth that we work with, that there's so much power in our identity, particularly as Latina folks who are growing up in the US South, who are leading and learning in the US South. It's just a different experience compared to what, some folks might see from coming from Texas or coming from California. So that's been a really cool part of my journey with Latinx Ed.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, let's take it to the present just to catch you up, Emilia.
Yes.
You kind of hear the origins of Latinx Ed being very much rooted in leadership development and college access. That continues to be true today. COVID was a critical time for us. We had just started in 2018, 2019, 2020 hit. And there was a lot of, like the rest of the world, a lot of recalibration around our strategies and how we were going to lead moving forward. Again, the origin of Latinx Ed, the vision had always been statewide. We hadn't seen a model that looked the same way that we were building. So a lot of it was like, what could this look like? Like, how could we build this network statewide? How could we sustain it? What could that look like? So a lot of questions, right? Especially being the first and trying to go through all that, thinking of how to build and how to model. But it started with, we decided the starting point would be a listening tour, which ended up being called the Somos en Sí listening tour. And what that would be is a chance for us to travel across the state, to be able to speak to families, to students, to community members, community leaders, to really understand what are the barriers, but also the opportunities when it comes to Latina student success. And at the beginning, it was like, this is a great opportunity to really learn. We have our own experiences, right? We've faced our own challenges. We've worked with students. We have a sense of the landscape, of course, but what does it look like to take time to like sit down and do some research, like formal research around what is happening across the state? So we ended up talking to over 250 people from all across North Carolina to inform what were those core themes. And so what came up from that tour was 4 areas, and they're easy to remember because it's a little ABCD moment here. So the first starts with the absence of Latina representation in leadership. And so that piece was across school district, across institution, across colleges, was just like, we do not have people that we can talk to. We don't have people who understand our community at these decision-making tables, and we can feel that when we're trying to communicate our needs. The second one was barriers to post-secondary access. So it was like whether that was culturally relevant advising, folks who understood how to support students who are impacted by undocumentation and navigating that journey, being able to even have bilingual resources and trying to access higher education. It was a big pain point of our community. The third one was cultural isolation. You kind of hear this in our stories too, when you don't know who you are and where you come from, or, it can impact your own journey. But on top of that, if schools are not designed to allow families to fully participate, an example would be having, Spanish speaking families be able, or parents in particular, being able to understand what's happening at school and how to advocate for their children. What happens when those things are not in place? Oftentimes you get left out. You don't get to participate fully. And then there becomes narratives about your community that are, whether stereotypes or just falsehoods, that we don't care about education because our parents aren't showing it, when it's like, well, these things are not conducive for full participation. And that is leading to cultural isolation, also mental health challenges where students and families are struggling to be a part of these systems and these really what they are, communities, right? And so that being a big theme of the tour around mental health and the challenges there. And the fourth is the disinvestment in education, the lack of funding, especially equitable funding when it comes to education at large, but also the unique needs that our community is facing as well. And so those four themes really help us get up close and personal with, like, what are the barriers and what are the things that we need to think about from a systemic level, and really start connecting that practice to policy and policy to practice. It's very, like a circle. So it really helps us figure out where to go, because from that, we also start the fellowship, which is now one of our biggest programs, the Latinx Ed Fellowship, which is what Kiara leads. So always got to, maybe I'll be like, Kiara, you need to tell us about it a little bit more. I'll set the stage and then she can talk more about it. But it became about building an intergenerational network of education leaders across the state, Latina education leaders, but an opportunity to really invest in their leadership and their voice in building the resources that they need to lead and to learn, and being able to help advance them into education, whether that's through their own academic journey, into higher education and or into their career. And what does that look like to be a part of this landscape? And we're up against significant challenges when it comes to representation. Just to share a little bit of numbers, just to ground us. We currently in North Carolina have 0 superintendents. So that's out of 115 districts that we don't have any Latina representation. When it comes to the General Assembly, folks who make decisions around our budget and what, the funding piece in particular, we have 0 people in the General Assembly that are Latina. I'm like, there's gaps already. It makes me sweat every time I tell this story, because I'm like, it could be so different. Yeah. In North Carolina, our population as a Latina community is almost 12% of the entire state. So if you were to think about just proportionate representation, it would look so much different, or so, be a very different landscape. When it comes to principals and teachers, they make up 4% of the teacher and principal population, where we have 21% of our school population are Latina students. So you already see that big gap. And even when we think about school board members, less than 1% of school board members are Latina. So when it comes to what we do in the fellowship, inviting people into this work, whether it is a young person who's very interested in being a part of this movement, or whether it's a seasoned professional, our ages for our fellowship range from 15 to even over 60 years old. So it is an opportunity to create this network where we're able to really sustain each other, because this work is very hard. And we did a research around that as well, called Nuestra Esperanza. These are all reports too that we've released for the public to be able to learn more about our community and what we're learning. But when it comes to folks who were asking to lead, and I've been in recruitment for a long time, because I was one of 13 students in my middle grades education major back in the day, and was really frustrated by that. I was like, we need to, so many more of us need to be here. And so I started recruiting. But now, as like a professional, and being able to use Latinx Ed as a platform and opportunity to really invest in other people's leadership, I have become very convicted that if we're going to ask people to lead, we also have to have their back. And what that looks like is making sure that we are able to provide information, knowledge, resources, but very much a community of support, because they're the people that we're asking to step up and lead these positions. They will likely be the first person ever the first Latina person specifically ever to probably hold that role. The chances are it might be a new role at their institution where they have to innovate and create very new things, because we're at that level of history in North Carolina. So what does it look like to ask people to step in, but also be able to have their back? That's been the heart of the fellowship, and it continues to fuel the network that we're building. But Kiana, or I know Emilia, we've said a lot. You might have some
Oh,
other questions, but
you're all good because honestly, what Kiara mentioned before also about college y consejos, that
yeah.
was another thing that I really wanted to hear about. But Kiara, if you want to talk about the fellowship in more depth, like please.
Yeah. I know. I was like, maybe we need to give Amelia a little moment to jump
I know, like process.
because we love talking about this work. So thank you for giving us this space to share a
Yeah, of
little bit more.
course.
But yeah, the fellowship, like Elaine has mentioned, so it started in 2021, with us bringing in 15 leaders, who essentially were really interested in using their voice and power to amplify issues of educational equity and to really work to advance education equity. And it has evolved into this really beautiful network of leaders across the state of North Carolina. We'll have 175 leaders across the state after this cohort graduates in November, of folks who are not just deeply passionate, right, about advancing issues of educational equity, but that are also deeply invested in their individual growth, the growth of the collective, and really working to advance our vision across the state of North Carolina and ensuring that the needs, of Latina immigrant youth and immigrant families are met and honored across the state. So we bring in folks to essentially engage with us for an in-person retreat. They get a chance to explore a little bit more about their identity, key topics connected to issues of educational equity across the state, and then they engage in additional training throughout the remainder of the experience. There's also a lot of storytelling connected to the work that we do, and one of the pieces that we often name as a part of the fellowship experience is that, our stories are really critical to driving this work forward, right? Like really amplifying the experiences of, the youth or the individuals that we're serving, really thinking about how our stories connect to this larger conversation of making a change in education is really important to, because as we're having these conversations, right, with policy and stakeholders or just leaders across the board, it's one thing to share the facts, but it's another thing to add color to it, right, with storytelling and just really making the connections to the folks and the people that are actually being impacted on the ground. So that's one of the pieces that I really deeply appreciate about the fellowship, that it's allowed us and really given, a platform to many of the leaders who are already doing this work, who have been doing this work across the state, but it's really, served as a connective tissue to help those folks who have been doing this work, connect to other leaders across the state. We're much more powerful when we're connected, and I think that's one of the ways in which the fellowship is allowing, some of these leaders who again have been doing this work to remain connected and to build, community and power across the state. So it's a really cool space for Latina leaders who are interested in, yeah, just taking their leadership to the next level.
No, yeah, for sure. It sounds like it is just like taking those Latina like that also want to learn about leadership as well and like just taking that
Mhm,
next level. It's
mhm,
inspiring as well. But one thing that I did wanted to ask you was about the Latina Education Summit. I know that wasn't it a couple of weeks ago that it happened? So like I just was wanted to know more about like how this had started and like, how was it? How was the last one that you guys had?
Such a great question. Well,
mhm,
it was a good time, Amelia. I'm gonna put that out there. We had a great time. It is actually technically our fourth
mhm,
Latina Education Summit. The first one was virtual because of COVID. But it was it's started and it continues to be a critical convening of education leaders and champions from across the state who care about issues of Latina education. And the first one was was again like an opportunity to be like, will they come? I think that's been a question I have every year. It's funny because as a, doing things for the first time, it's a wild idea to convene people from all across the state and create this experience for them, and see what comes from it. But with the first cycle of the listening tour, we had built so many relationships across the state just by going and traveling and visiting different colleges and institutions, and schools and communities. So the opportunity was like, well, can we get everybody together? Because even in these focus groups that we were doing, there would be people who were neighbors and they had not met each other yet. And it was like, wait a minute, y'all are literally on the same street. You need to know each other. You're amazing. You're doing such great work for the community. Let's connect you and see what comes from that. And so that became, in many ways, it's defined Latinx Ed and who we are and where we're headed. Because one opportunity that has been a challenge for North Carolina is not having this connective tissue of education advocates and leaders across the state. There's a myth about us as well, especially Latina education leaders, is that we don't exist. And we do very much so exist. But there's times where you may not see that visibility at a statewide level. You may know it more at a regional level. But also we have incredible leadership across the state, and their voices need to be amplified. And we need to see that visibility increase, especially as we work to advance representation in education. So the summit started off, I remember the first in-person summit, which was 2022. Again, Amelia, the question, will they come? Because even in person, we were still in that in-person shift of like headed back to in-person, but it was still challenging, considering all the health pieces that were, part of this. But the community not only showed up, they sold out the event. And it was such an inspirational time of learning, of being able to connect and network with people just that are, doing even similar work to each other, but across the state. So they don't always get a chance to interact with each other. So it was like finding your other me, but in the summit. And it was also a time of rest. I think our community, especially in education, it's a underfunded field. It is not easy. A lot of us who choose this path is because we have a strong commitment to leadership. And so there's a big, deep why, but there's also a lot of burnout and a lot of stress when it comes to trying to sustain your role yourself in an ecosystem that's not conducive for growth sometimes. And so just being able to find other people who can understand that journey, who want to pour into you, who want to support you, who care about you, that sometimes can feel like rare air. And that's really what the first summit that was in person, because there's a different energy in person versus virtual, right? But in person, it just launched this like, whoa, we all exist and we're all in the same room. And for some folks, they had never been in a room like that. They had been the only Latina person in their district or in their school and in their network that was doing this. And then to be in a room surrounded by people who looked like you, who understood you, who you didn't have to explain yourself to, who already got it. And just were looking for connection. It was a really powerful experience at first. And people walked away being like, this is the best summit we've ever been to. And I was like, wait a minute, tell me why. And, we are big on, we're Southern too, which is funny, part of our identity. So we're always big on, treating people really well. And the hospitality is a really big part of our culture. And so that's probably partly why, but I think it's also just the magic of good people coming together, uniting, sharing a vision together, and continuing to return to their home or to their role and continuing that. So the summit has been that catalyst for many people. It's an invitation to folks. You don't have to, even anything that we do, you don't have to be in a formal role to be a part of our movement. It's really an invitation to join this movement and to find your role if you're not sure where your role is. But a community is out here waiting and waiting to help plug you in. And so that's been the evolution. Like I mentioned, Latinx Ed is becoming the connective tissue for education, Latina education issues in the state. And we're able to even launch that through partnership, through our community impact work, where we get to work on different projects, sometimes short-term, sometimes long-term, but to be able to really help create systemic level change through policy and advocacy. And so the summit is a chance to convene people to talk about what we're learning. In many ways, it's kind of like our homecoming because, it's like a big reunion, but we get to also put really important issues on the table and make sure that people are aware of what's happening across the state when it comes to Latina education.
Mhm.
Yeah, Kara, I don't know if you wanted to add a little bit more about like, the fellowship, sorry, not the fellowship, but the summit, and then talk a little bit more about college y consejos. You mentioned it as well.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like Elaine has really captured the magic of Summit and just really that purpose, right, of bringing folks together across the state, serving as this um yeah, space for folks to connect. As you were chatting, Elaine, I was writing down like family reunion is what folks always say as a part of the feedback for the summit. So it's been really cool, especially as our fellowship network grows. It's been exciting to see fellows also be an important part of that space, and continuing to cultivate relationships across the state. But yeah, connected to our College y Consejos work, that was, yeah, to what we've named earlier, right? Like College y Consejos was this opportunity for us to offer services in a virtual environment when folks were still navigating what it meant like to continue working and collaborating together in the pandemic. So it was a really exciting, I think, moment for us to really lean into the virtual space and to offer services through a virtual format. One of the things that has really evolved, right, is this idea of what does it look like to provide this information for students and families while also working to make changes at the systems level. And so our work around College y Consejos has evolved now to really think about training other allies and educators across the state so that they can do the work in their local communities. One of the things that we often heard from students as we were serving them via College y Consejos is this desire to like have someone in their community to help them with these same processes. And so a lot of the work that we're doing now that's connected to that college access work is all about equipping those folks in the local communities to drive this work forward. The folks who are in, who are training, who are these educators and allies, they have the relationships, they've been able to cultivate really strong partnerships with students and families in their communities. So to now have this extra piece of our work connecting to equipping those local community leaders feels, like a really powerful continuation of the work that we started with College y Consejos. So it's been really cool to just see how our work has continued to evolve to meet the needs that we're seeing emerge from our community across the state.
yeah, for sure. And you mentioned that, well, it was virtual in the beginnings because of the
Mhm.
pandemic. Does it still like go now like virtually like College Consejos, or is it like another initiative or program?
Yeah, so College y Consejos has folded into our training and workshop community impact type of work. So that happens with educators and allies across the state in a virtual format, in person. We love to come out to communities and do trainings for those educators or folks who are working with students at their local institutions or in their local communities. We do still offer some resources for students and families, including a scholarship database that we still keep up to date. We also amplify different opportunities across all of our social media. And then many of the services that we offered as a part of College y Consejos are now a part of our fellowship experience. So for students who are in the Triangle, who are interested in really exploring, continuing to explore leadership, using their voice, empowered to advance topics of educational equity, and who want to continue to explore their own educational journey, they can receive those services as a participant in the fellowship. So there's many ways of us still continuing to offer those pieces, but it really just depends on the audience at this stage.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Um, and just in general, are there any like upcoming like initiatives or just like programs or events that, Latinx Ed it's planning out, or, that might we might want to be on the loop of?
Yeah, I'm like, we are always up to something. Let me tell you, Amelia, we're always something. I think one exciting piece as we continue our statewide work is being able to get closer to regions, really unique areas in the state that are having such opportunity, really at its core. And so we are able to, right now we're starting a project where we get to go deeper with the east part of North Carolina. And what I think is fascinating, I just shared at the summit some data around the population of Latina students across the state in different school districts. And if you were to think about which school districts have the highest number of Latina students, areas like Wake or Wake County or Mecklenburg County schools might come to mind, and you wouldn't be wrong. Definitely right that those are areas that have a high number of the Latino population in general, but also have a high number of Latino students. Another way to think about the data, though, is also where is the highest percentage of the Latina population across North Carolina. And when I think about that in school districts, what's wild to me is those numbers are actually really tremendous in certain areas, but that don't necessarily coincide with the highest number. That was me getting nerdy on us for a second. But one example would be Asheboro City Schools, that now has 50% of their student population in this district is Latina. I'm like, wow, that sure was not my experience growing up. And now I'm like, what is that like to be able to be part of now a growing majority of a population? It's similar numbers or similar percentages of like upwards of 30 and 40%, but particularly in the eastern part of North Carolina. So what we are up to is now learning more about institutions, specifically community colleges, and how they are equipped to serve the Latina population, considering the high percentage of our population that exists in these areas. So catch us in the East. And if you're from the East, we'd love to talk to you, because it's such a, again, it's a unique experience to be where you're from, right? And for us, the rural areas have a special place in our heart because a lot of us were raised in those areas. And we know the challenges, but also the beautiful opportunities that exist in our rural areas. And so this is just an opportunity to do even more learning, but also community engagement. And that's something that Latinx Ed has been able to really build our muscle in, is how to bring community together to inform strategy, to inform practices, to inform funding. And so that's something else that you'll see us up and about doing a lot of, bringing our community to the table to have a voice in how these institutions organize and lead. I will share another really exciting journey that Latinx Ed has been on, is learning more about Hispanic serving institutions and the impact that Hispanic serving institutions have in our state. I did not know what an HSI was up until I was probably in grad school. I don't think I had heard of an HSI or understood that, federal designation. And there's a lot that goes into it. But in short, these are institutions of higher education that have over 25% of their student population that are full-time degree-seeking students that are Latina. And North Carolina actually has, and like, for folks who are listening, think about how many you think there are in North Carolina. There are actually 3 in North Carolina, and they are all community colleges. And I think that's really, there's a powerful narrative there, but there's also something called, or other, I guess, if you will, designation kind of called the emerging Hispanic serving institutions. And these are institutions that are at that 15 to 25% that have Latina students enrolled, again, in a full-time degree seeking status. And there are 19, as of 2022, 2023 data, that are emerging here in North Carolina. 19 emerging. I'm like, woo, I don't know if that number was in your mind, but that's where we're at. And again, the majority of those institutions are community colleges. So our work moving forward, a big ally, a big partner of ours are community colleges. And also partners that work with community colleges, because community colleges are a critical lever for Latino student success. And there's a lot of incentives, benefits when institutions serve their student population better. I can list a long list. There's even funding opportunities too. And so it's just like, we're, especially through the designation of the HSI designation, but we're here to help not only increase the capacity of these institutions to evolve and to deepen their services, but also to build the leadership from within to lead. If we were to use community colleges as an example, we've never had a Latino community college president. So if you think about that and the trajectory of HSIs, there's a big opportunity here to really invest in Latina leadership within community colleges. And I will say every single sector, don't get me wrong, but there's a particular one here as we see community colleges continuing to be a critical lever for Latina student success. So catch us, I guess in short, catch us working in the eastern parts of North Carolina and the western part. And shout out to Western Carolina that is going through so much right now. But Western Carolina has also been such a critical portal of innovation and change. And right now our community is hurting. So we're just encouraging folks to really think about how we can support our communities out in Western Carolina, but it also continues to be an area of much opportunity for Latina student success. So catch us in the rural areas, catch us at community colleges, catch us training anybody and their mama that wants to know about how to better serve Latina students. Our role is very much the connector, the convener, the trainer, and being able to really change the way our systems are and the ways that our students can better navigate these systems and, and how they can be better served.
Mm-hmm. I'll add the other opportunity for folks to be on the lookout for is going to be our 2025 fellowship application, which comes out in early 2025 each year. So be on the lookout for that in February. So any folks who are interested in moving into education advocacy and see themselves as education leaders. And honestly, even if you don't and you're just curious about what it means to use your voice and power to advance educational equity across North Carolina, and you identify as Latina, we have space for you to join our fellowship. So we invite folks to, join us.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of like to wrap up the program, this is gonna be for Latina Heritage Month special. And I just wanted to, invite you guys to kind of like just a message to our Latina community here in the Triangle area. Like, what would that message be that you guys want to like send to our Latina community?
Like, not the eyes, Elaine.
I'm like, Kira.
I think the one piece that I just hope that the Latina community continues to remember and is reminded of is the power that we hold. We have so much power, especially when we come together. So just continuing to think about the ways in which we collaborate, the way in which we continue to amplify each other, whether that's our leadership, right? The initiatives that we're leading across the state. There just can be so much that comes out when we work together because of the power that we hold. So don't forget, the power that we hold and the opportunity that can come from collaboration.
Yeah.
I love that. I will keep riffing on the same thread and just say, somos de aquí, somos de allá. We are from here, we are from there. And I think that connects to Kiara's message of how much we have within us power, strength, beauty, possibility. And now, as we start to really embrace that, it becomes how do we move from dreams to action? And that's something that we say at Latinx Ed a lot. And we say it as a reminder to ourselves that we are doing big things, hard things, things that require radical imagination. And now the opportunity becomes to move into that action phase. And back to what Kiara's mentioning is that we are here as a community. We're building community to support that journey. That can be very difficult, and in and of its core, it's leadership, but how to move others, including yourself, to and through the change process into what hopefully is a transformational, positive impact within our community. And so it's a sacred space to be a part of. It's a sacred mandate to hold. And I'm just eager, just like Kiara mentioned, to just remind our community of the beauty that is within us and the opportunity to lead from a place of wholeness.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much, Elaine and Kiara, for being here today at Eye on the Triangle. It is inspiring everything that you guys are doing, and I'm just like, like hearing everything about like Latinx ed. It's just like I don't even have the words. But yeah, again, thank you so much for being here at Eye on the Triangle. This was a very special program, and so like, thank you again.
Thank you, Amelia. No, thank you for holding space for us. We would be remiss if we didn't share all the ways that people could find us. You can see our website at www.latinxed.org, or you can find us on any social media, pretty much any social media platform at Latinx Education. So come check us out, follow us, sign up for our newsletter. There's so many ways to be in touch and stay in touch with all the things that Latinx Ed is up to. If you're an Instagram user, you'll love us. We have a good time on Instagram. So come find us at Latinx Education. And Amelia, shout out to you. We see you doing big things. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here, and just inspired by your journey as well into college and beyond, right? So thank you for being an inspiration yourself.
Thank you so much.
Feliz mes de la herencia latina. This has been your host, Emilia Rivadeneira. Gracias por escuchar Eye on the Triangle. Music in today's episode is Latino by Auto Banru, licensed under Creative Commons.